Hi there, Liz. Here we are with another week conversation. I'm looking forward to
Hi.
it. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. I've just had a root canal done, so I'm in a little bit of pain today, but it's good to see you and your smiling, beautiful face. So I'm happy to chat. So today, everybody, we're going to be talking about, or we thought we'd chat about how we name our pieces and how we describe them, what words we use, how we actually generate our explanation and where that comes from and the process of which, because the naming and the explaining is putting it out in the world, giving birth to it is a big deal. I had my lovely mentoring student with me this week, and we were talking about posting on Instagram and it's sort of giving birth, right? That's you when you let it go into the universe. So is there any particular process that you do, Deni? Is there any sort of pattern that you have in terms of naming your pieces?
I go through different stages with naming. For me, the naming is really important.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting because really, in some ways our art speaks for itself, but for me, words are really important as well. So I've actually been told that some people who've bought my work have bought the piece because of the words that were with it,
Yeah.
as much as the piece itself. Like they might have been deciding on two, and it was the words that really drew them to one more than the other. Um, and for me, I go through stages of it either being a reflection of what I'm going through when I'm painting something. So it's really tied up in whatever's happening to me personally, often that
Mm-hmm.
space, or some reflection on life that I'm seeing and it feels like it's reflected in the work. Or or it's a bit more of a humorous approach. Like I just see something in it that sparks a memory or a thought of something that's happened. And it's often kind of childhood memories of moments.
Mm.
And they're
And
a little.
how do you let those come in? Do you sit with the piece? Do you sit and look at it or does that happen as you're painting, or do you sit back and watch and look and observe and sort of be in it, and then it might come to you? At what stage do you start thinking about the name?
The name. Um, Really when it's finished and I'm sitting with it, like it might be on my wall, or it might be in a place in my studio that I pass every day, and it just um, to be honest, it's pretty instantaneous. When I know it's finished, it tells a story to me, or life and what's going on for me at that time tells a story to me. And the
Mm.
painting is a part of that. I mean, it's got all those emotions of what was going on for me in it,
Yeah.
and it just kind of becomes apparent that that's what it's about. I mean, I paint so much from the moment of what I'm in, and the emotion of what I'm in, that it's not surprising that that comes out in the words
Yeah.
as
No,
well.
absolutely. So
Um,
what give us an example of some titles that you loved that
um, okay, I'll tell you an amusing one, and that was a painting that I did. It was over a year ago, and it was very bright. It was a very bright painting. It had a lot of light blue, and a lot of like light blues and spearminty kind of greens, and it had this big, bright, bold orange area.
Wow, I don't think I've seen that one. I need to go back and have a look at some of that work
Yeah,
of
well,
yours.
funnily enough, it's a very bright painting, and it's probably my most popular post I've ever done is that painting, and it's because it
Mhm.
is so bright. And I had just finished it, and it was in my studio, and I put the news on. I don't watch the news very often. It's very, very rare that I'll put the news on, but I happened to, and there was a story, a ridiculous story, about this goldfish bowl that was, the fish was dry. They'd set it up so that when the fish moved, the bowl moved. So it looked like the goldfish was driving the bowl around.
Oh my gosh, how
It
amazing, how funny.
was so odd that it just, like when I went down to the studio and I saw my painting and I saw this big orange fish. It was just so obvious to me that it was the goldfish. Like it was like this goldfish. So I think that the title was something like, the goldfish driving or something ridiculous like that, because it just
very random. People are like, what is she smoking that day? That would have been quite an interesting story to open up with people, I'm sure. That were asking, where did that come from?
Well, things like that. And there was a stage I went through where, like I often do kind of scribbles on my work. And there was one particular bright pink one that had a lot of light pink scribbles. And it looked like, and it reminded me of when I was young and I used to go to the movies and someone would throw like a lolly at your hair and it would get stuck in your hair. And it looked like, or chewing gum, and used to take forever to try and get some chewing gum out of your hair. And that was exactly what all the scribbles on the painting looked like. So that's the kind of random stuff.
So you called it chewing gum in your hair? Yeah, what did you name it? Oh, brilliant.
So that was a stage I went through where it was just really, everything was amusing me. So it was coming up in my paintings. I think I'm in a little bit more of a serious mood now. And it's a little bit more of a reflection of what's going on in the world and the planet, and it's a bit more serious, but that's kind of how things shift for me. It's so personal as to where I am and how I'm looking at life. So at that time I would have a very amused look, and I'm a bit more serious about it now. What about you? How do you name yours?
Yeah, similar. It's definitely right at the end of the process, and I have a sofa in my studio, and during the development of a painting, I'll paint, and then I'll sit back and I'll just be in it. And certainly at that end stage where it's really, I'm sort of, just analyzing if it is really finished, I sort of open it up to, what do you want to be called? And it might, and similar to you, it might be something that I'm listening to in a podcast. It might be something that sort of I'm filtering through me somehow subconsciously, and just a sentence comes up, or it can also be really random. And then it's quite fun just to sit and let words drop, or sort of little short sentences drop in. And I don't know where they come from sometimes. And the painting, you sort of, one drops in, and I sort of hold it up to it, feel it for size, and doesn't feel quite right, but the sort of concept is right. And then it sort of gradually molds into something that the painting claims. Sometimes it doesn't stay. Sometimes I come in, another day, and I'm like, no, that is not what it should be called, and I'll change it. But because it can be so spontaneous, I don't always remember the names that I find. And so when somebody says, oh, I love I don't know, whatever, frolicking in the grass, I don't even know, I've never had a painting called that, but and I'm like, oh, crumbs, what's that one? And so I have to go back and then of course, oh yeah, of course that's what it is. But they don't sink into my system, because they sort of become owned by the painting, not me.
Yeah.
And so it's real. I love having titles. They don't feel complete without a title. And it is a reflection of what's going on subconsciously, psychologically, emotionally, and what I'm listening to, what I'm focused on. But it's, looking back, I sort of went through some of my, I use Artwork Archive as a website to archive all my paintings as I do them. And I don't do it every week, but I upload them in bulk. So, I was going back and looking at some of them to try and remember. But there's a lot about time, echo through time. It's in the quiet moments. Yeah, lots around time, which is really interesting. I've printed out the same page, but there seems to be a lot about that. And because very often when I'm painting, I lose track of time, and I'm so immersed in it. So and then the other day I did a sort of really nutty one, and I was in a completely carefree, very sort of playful mood, and it just, what did I call it? Licorice and lollipops. And that just felt kind of right for it. But it's nice, sometimes on Instagram, when you do give birth and you name it and sort of christen it and send it out in the world, when artists acknowledge the name of the painting and say that's a perfect name for it. And so yeah, it's important. I don't know that I've actually had anybody that really has chosen a painting because of the title.
Yeah.
But I think it does influence somebody, because it with abstract, there's almost there seems to be sometimes, not all the time with collectors, a sort of need to justify why it resonates, and a sort of deeper context for some people. They like it, don't quite know why it like it, but if somebody can hang on to, there's one painting that I have called Conversations by the Beach. Something like that. I can't even remember. But it doesn't necessarily look like a beach painting. And so then oh, well, I love the beach and I have a beach house. And of course that's, so then it sort of feels like for the collector, a nice justification to go, that's why I like it, which might not necessarily have been why they immediately resonated. So I think it's a helpful bridge into abstract to sort of set a context of where we were at when we were creating it.
Yeah.
So
I almost think at times that I have a theme or something I'm pondering. So almost the words lead the painting. So I'm pondering something, and it's that's going through me and into the painting at the time. And I know that I'm going to call it something, and I know what it's about because it's driving it, like that thought.
Can you give us an example?
Gosh, I'd have to look on Instagram to find one, and maybe I could write one because I'm not sure if I can find one now actually, but I just know that there's been times where I've been pondering something, like it's usually a life thing or something I'm going through, and I can feel that as I'm painting, and I can feel what I want to write, because often it'll be like I'll name a painting and I'll have a post all at once, like it's actually the heading is the painting title and it's something that I have to say, and it's just it's just words that need to be spoken, kind of like the same way that a painting needs to be painted. So for me, they're so interlinked, the words and the painting. They're just so important for each other to be together, and I think it's important because they're quite ambiguous in a way, titles, right? So I think it just gives the people who are looking at your work or want to buy it something to go down without it needing to be the whole way. It just gives like it's like a door opening.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, like a context and a bridge for them to sort of link into. Yeah. And then it's open to interpretation, but it's that setting and that context feels like it's sort of a lift in or a escorting into into our internal world.
Yeah, but like you, isn't it exciting when you've kind of got these works and you've forgotten about them in a way, and someone asks about a painting, like you said, and it's a name, and you think, oh my goodness, that's so cool that that's become something, like it's now a baby because it has this name and it's out in the world and people are calling it that. That's kind of
no, it's really, I find, and I don't know whether you feel the same, that I often, the posting of a painting on Instagram is almost like you're pregnant with it, and then you need to just let it fly the nest and see how it lands in the world and release it, and release not any connection, but any chords that you have with it. to move on to something else. It sort of opens up it feels like when I don't release them, I'm back getting backlogged and gunked up.
Yes.
That's probably too strong, but you know what I mean? It's sort of,
I do know what you mean. And I often do that before I know they're finished. So sometimes because I'll post at all different stages of a painting, but sometimes I really just need it to be out there and not in my head anymore. So I
understand.
even if they're not ready.
Yeah. So when you do that, do you explain that it's a work in progress, or what do you say?
Not always. Sometimes. And I noticed that. So I was posting really regularly last year, and then I took a bit of time off over Christmas and January and didn't post much. And I noticed how much more precious I got when I started posting again. I was like, wow, last year I was just really loose with, let it go, post. It doesn't matter, post at different stages. And then I noticed that I can't put that. I can't put that. And I think that it's like a muscle, allowing yourself to be seen at all different stages. I guess it's like that in life too, right?
Yeah.
I thought, you just need to do this more, because I think it's really important to show. It's important for me as part of my process to show the different stages, not just the finished piece. So it was something that I thought, okay, I'm going to post a bit more regularly at different stages, make sure that I do it, because I like how that loosens me up. I like how it loosens my painting up if I do it.
Yeah, there definitely is an energetic, severing's too hard. It's just like a giving birth to,
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. I would never have thought that, because it's not like I certainly for me, it's not like I'm posting going, look, da-da. It's almost sort of more selfish in a way. This is kind of go, okay, bye, you're done for now. And that's the other thing is, when you do launch it, do you set it off with, do you set it free with the kind of, you're not quite formed, you're ready to go, you're like, you don't necessarily say what stage you're at, you just kind of let it go into the world, and
unless I know it's really complete, and then I might even say that it's for sale or it's on my website or whatever. It's like it's a beginning of a conversation. Like it's like it starts the conversation, or it starts the communication with the world when you put it out there. And I think it's like you say, it's very energetic. It's like what does this feel like now that it's out there?
Yeah.
Does it need to come home?
Yes. Does it need to come back and have a little bit more noodling and coaching? And is it? Yeah. Isn't that amazing? It's really, it has an energetic vibration to it.
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
And sometimes I can be quite surprised at what I get back. It could be quite different than what I was intending, but there is this conversation. I love the exchange. I think in our last talk we were talking about whether it's important for people to see paintings or whether it's just about painting them. For me, I'm very much about connection. So that connection that happens through a painting or through words really lights me up. So I love that exchange.
And it's so fascinating I posted one that I'm this big one I have here on the easel the other week, and to say don't quite know where I'm taking it, but I know I need to do a lot more work. But I wanted to open it up to just be able to receive the spectrum of feedback and comments from people saying, I don't like the black bit, it's finished, don't touch it. It's so hugely diverse that it almost reminds you that there's not a right and wrong. There's not a final, you know, or a line that you cross going, yes, that's a good painting, and I'm not quite there yet. It's so subjective, and we all have our own lens of which we observe and judge and receive other people's work, and you know, that I find absolutely fascinating, and also very freeing as well, because, you know, it really does make you realize that we all come at it from a different point of view, really.
And I think also there's something in that conversation, because I enjoy talking with other artists, and I enjoy mentoring or teaching, and I think that there is I get a lot of feedback that helps, like my posting and seeing who I am with posting helps others see that, do that as well, or feel like that's, oh, okay, we can, you know, that feels, it's like a permission slip. I mean, we've talked about that before, so I like that too. Like I just need to lose the fear of it, of being judged, or yeah.
But that's the thing in it. You know, I probably should think about it a little bit more carefully. But it feels so. You know, while I love the connection, like you, do you ever? It feels so out there that you can't even, you know, it's not like you're walking into a room of people that you know you're going to be immediately face to face judged by. I forget sometimes the audience that you do reach, and how, you know, how much responsibility really we do need to take to what we're posting and stand by what we're saying, and not the responsibility for how people are reacting, but the responsibility to be genuine and authentic in what we're saying and how we're explaining it, because there's a lot of people that read it and receive it and, you know, can take it literally. So you know, while I can be sometimes not flippant, but I can not be thorough with my thinking of where I'm at. I try to be really conscious about what I'm releasing, but also how I'm releasing it.
Yeah. There's definitely been sometimes where I've gone to post something at nighttime, and I've put the words with it, and I've gone, you know what? I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and just read that through. And in the morning, I've decided against it, because sometimes I can get really passionate about something and just want to put it out there. And I know to take a step back, just hold fire on that one.
So, Deni, that goes against the person that you started off by saying, I don't care if I'm too much. I don't care if I want to be too much. Like,
yeah, I want to be too much, but like you're saying, I also want to be really true. And sometimes that can be coming from a place of just, you know, the surface something, and I really need to sit with it. Is this actually true, or is this just, you know, a momentary emotion or feeling or anger or whatever? So it's not so much that I'm not being authentic or showing up. It's more you know, I've got a lot of Aries as my rising. It's something that I like doing things, and sometimes just stepping back a little bit and waiting is a really good idea for me.
So Aries, what's the tendency with an Aries personality?
Aries, they just shoot off the cuff really quickly. Their energy is very much a starting, an initiation. So it's I'm very good at. It's why I think I'm good in groups, because I'm good at firing other people up and getting them going and getting them moving, and, you know, that initial spark, fire starter is what I call it, as an energy. So, and that can also mean that I say things off the cuff, and maybe had I held back, then I probably would have pondered and thought, I'm not quite sure that that's absolutely true. So that's how my Aries comes out. My Aries.
I admire your confidence. You seem to be, you know, the more I've got to know you, you're very confident in who you are and what you do. You know, you're human and a creative. I presume that you still have, you know, self-doubts, but where does that confidence come from, and have you always had it?
possibly been the youngest of 9 children, so that could have something to do with it. But I have always been quite a strong human.
Were you doted on by all your other siblings? Were you being the baby, everybody just completely doted on you?
Look, either they doted on me or I was completely forgotten about. So I think it was one or the other. And I think that a lot of the strength comes from having to show up, to be heard. And so I think that, I think a lot of people would describe me as being quite self-assured and self-confident.
Yeah.
I guess that's where it comes from. I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, because having also that safety net of love and close relationships must be such a beautiful thing. It's something that I just have one twin brother, and my parents, my mum died when I was little, and so I didn't have that. So I think that I really envy that I always the safety net that you have in that surrounding love must have been a really great thing to build from, foundation to build your own strength from. And seeing your siblings sort of thrive and grow and go through life, you're like, if they can do it, I can do it. And
I think, like you say, I mean, I had two parents, and two parents. We all have two parents. I had two parents who really loved me, and I knew that I could. I knew I had their unconditional support, no matter what I did. So that can really have a huge effect on you from young, right? You losing your mum is probably so defined who you are now.
Yeah, absolutely, hugely. And still continues. So, but that's what our soul journeys chose, right? I was listening to a podcast the other day about who was it? I can't remember. I think it was my favorite one of oh God, I'm so brain dead. But it was talking about how our souls get to a soul bus stop, and all the souls sort of gather around, and we're choosing what kind of life, and we're going, okay, well, I need to be a murderer, and who am I going to murder? So can you be my victim? And someone goes, I don't really want to be murdered in this lifetime. And they're, please, I really need to go through this lesson of self-love and forgiveness, but I just need, so it's okay, I'll be murdered by you. And it was quite funny the way it was being, and I do believe in that kind of, but the way she was setting it up was, that visual was really funny.
It's that idea that when we release these bodies, that we all come back to some understanding that we're all souls with these lessons that we've learned at Earth School, I guess.
Yes. Absolutely.
So Liz, what are you working on this week? Have you got?
So I've had this really great weekend. My studio is so tidy, and I have it all set up. But I was working with one of my mentoring students all day Sunday and all day Monday, and so that was really great. But my focus was purely on sort of painting with her, not really. What I realized is, as I was painting, I was very much wanting to hold space for her, and show my approach, and show my my thought processes as much as I can, without really investing in what I was doing. It was really just sort of setting a stage of, this is how I do it, and this is how radical I can be with all my. So that was interesting. So, today when I came in and looked at some of the pieces that I had been working on, I'm like, really? I had a really great time. It was a really beautiful experience. And then she helped me clear up my studio, because tomorrow night I'm hosting a big event for the mayor of Newark, who's coming, and they're having a drinks, fundraising in my studio, which is a little, I mean, my friend asked me if she could use it, but they're used to big mansions in LA or, New York, and they're coming to my art studio. And I was like, there's paint all over the floor. Anyway, so I sort of have cleaned it up, and then I had something that was going to take all day tomorrow, and I wasn't going to be able to paint, but now that's cancelled. And So I can. So I don't know quite what I'm working on right now. I've got some pieces that I know I need to go back into and rework. But I need time to sit with them and really understand where they're going and what they need. And I I've still got a lot of big empty canvases. I keep going back to old ones at the moment. So that's what I seem to be wanting to do, is there's a shift in my aesthetic, or my whatever I'm after in my work. And I'm enjoying not having to build it from complete scratch. Although I love those early stages.
With the old canvases, have they got lots and lots of layers on them, or are they? Yeah. And how do you feel about that? Like the layer upon layer and the thickness of the textures underneath, does it?
Well, no, I kind of like it. I mean, I actually sitting here and the light's shining on it, and there's all kinds of, you can see the globs and you can see where I've scraped into it. It all sort of adds to something. There's actually a three-dimensional texture to that now. Yeah. What I have found, and what was interesting with this big piece, is that I was so enjoying building up the layers and creating moments of history that I haven't stepped in early enough with my design brain, and it got to a stage where it really needed designing, and I just kept on going with more textures and more. So now I've got a lot to really choose what I'm going to let go of, whereas I normally step in much earlier. Yeah. So but I just let it drift. So that would be interesting, really pulling it back. But I love having the background. Sometimes I start with it and thinking, oh, I'm going to try and keep this area. Inevitably, as soon as I think, oh, I'm going to try and keep that area, I brush out. I put a brush over it, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe not. so I I can't necessarily keep a hold of sometimes it's too slippery. They slip through it slips through my hands, and then you have to make another decision based on what you've just lost. Yeah. So yeah, so that's it's sort of there's sort of feeling like there's newness ready to happen, a bigger newness, but I'm not quite ready to jump into that yet. But how about you?
Oh, well, I've been working small. I've been working 12 by 12, so really small. And I've been enjoying just the freshness of new canvas, because obviously with smaller paintings, you're doing a lot more. And so when I've gone, because I've been now thinking, okay, I do need to start thinking about some bigger pieces. And I've got some older pieces that I can rehash. And it's the texture that's already on there is bugging me. It's like, has it gone too far, and I just need to scrap those and get some new ones, and that's going to give me a different feeling in them. So I was kind of interested as to how you felt about old work. I get some canvases that I've had for so long and they just never resolve, and it's like they just don't. It's just this piece that it never goes anywhere. Do you find that too?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you just have to put it to bed. Very interestingly, I bought some canvases from an artist that was moving out of the manufacturer's village late last year, and she had a whole load of new ones, and I bought those from her, which were great and much reduced. And then she had some pieces that she had started working on but not really done that many layers, and so they were really, all it needed was gessoing over. They were extremely hard to work on, because it was somebody else's energy in there. Oh, wow. And I found it really hard to shift it, and it wasn't aligned with my own energy. So it was a battle, and I didn't realize it was what was going on until I'm like, oh, of course, this was behind this painting. And so what I actually ended up doing was collaging over the majority of it and being completely radical, not trying to work with paint, but just really covering it over. Yeah. And then actually just kind of, trying to release the whatever was there. and thank it and send it packing, which sounds a bit woo-woo, but and I did manage to actually accomplish some things that were really quite radically different for me. It sent me in a really, some of those blocky canvases that I did the resin on were some of those pieces. So that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's given me a good idea of just being wildly experimental with them and not be thinking of them as pieces, but just these areas to have fun.
Yes. Yeah, completely. And sometimes you find you don't have to work quite so hard because it comes up to meet you.
Yeah.
So
I have had the feeling with just like a board or something that I've just got on the side, and I'm just scrapping paint on it while I'm painting something else, and it's like that happens to go, God, that's actually what I want this to look like, because I'm not caring here and I'm caring too much here. So I so hear you.
Do you, what I was encouraging Karen to work on is her sketchbook much more, and do those real warm-up experimental, just pushing as many edges as you can. But rather than doing this sketchbook and then working on the piece, pulling from some of the experience that you had in, almost doing it the other way. So your focus is on really investing in your sketchbook, and then flicking some whatever paint and residue, marks on your canvas, because often it can be the other way around, right? So your sketchbook is much more carefree, but flipping it, because there was a tendency to want to finish a piece and be very precious about the end result. And so we're going to try and see how flipping it might work a little bit more. So
yeah,
it's good to have those trade-offs.
Yeah, and it's when you feel yourself getting tight, and you find yourself getting tight when it starts feeling like it's getting somewhere. And that's those moments of just like, let it go, because it's always, particularly with how I paint, it's when I'm looser and just have a much looser brush stroke that I get the magic that I'm looking for.
Because when you say tight, there is nothing about your paintings that I think of as tight. What would you define as tight? I mean, they feel very loose and very, very expressive and very, uncontrolled. But I know they are.
Right? Yeah, so, and there are times where it feels like I've done that too much. Like I'm being too. It's almost like, how you're saying that your design brain comes in. It's like my design brain has just come and parked for the day, and it needs to go again. It's okay to bring that design brain in and resolve one or two things, and then it needs to go, and that loop and the fun of it, or the energy in it, needs to come back. Because
how many layers do you do on your paintings, do you think?
Oh my God, some of them I can have many, but at the moment I'm doing less and less, because I'm really enjoying a surface that doesn't have as much paint on it. And while I still am doing layers, I'm not allowing it to get that thick sort of glugginess. That's just not lighting me up as it used to. I used to do layer upon layer upon layer and love that texture that came through. Now it's feeling like there's too many layers and too much history, and that I want the paintings to be a little bit fresher. Mm-hmm. So yeah, at the moment, because I'm experimenting with where the energy moves around paintings, I'm trying to do less of a layer on the canvas and more across canvases. So it's almost like this exchange from one to the next.
And then how many do you work on in any one go?
So at any one go, I've probably got about 4 to 6 pieces.
And you have them on your wall, you have them on a table, you have them on a...
I've got a table front, and I've got a couple of easels, and so I've got about 3 on my table and a couple on easels as well, and then sometimes on floor, depending on where I'm wanting, because I don't always want them upright, and sometimes I do want them upright because you might want to get some sort of drip action. So it's just they just move around. I mean, when I'm working, my studio is a complete mess, which I'm sure you relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Well, my pain meds had just kicked in. I just felt it lift. So thank you for our conversation. I knew it would distract me, and so yeah, it's been really great chatting to you. And I hope this conversation is helpful to whoever listens in. So until next week.